Rise and shine. This is your morning Buzzcast for Friday, May 9th. I'm Austin Karp, taking things into Mother's Day weekend. Looks like YouTube is getting closer to landing that Brazil NFL game this season. It would be its first exclusive NFL game stream. SBJ first reported the news around a month or so ago, and The Athletic last night reported that it is seeming even more likely, and that it would actually be a free game for people to watch, available on YouTube and for any existing subscribers of YouTube TV. We're going to have some more details on this over at SBJ soon, so check that out over there. But the point here, everybody still wants a piece of the NFL, and those next larger media rights deals talks are going to be super competitive dollar signs for the executives at the NFL. It also remains earnings season, the end of media earnings season, I suppose. So let's dig into some of the Thursday financial reports out there. TKO Group Holdings, owner of WWE and UFC, reported Q1 earnings that topped analyst expectations. My colleague Adam Stern writes the company appears to be successfully executing around its vision for the holding company. The Q1 results come due to the growth that TKO is seeing in areas like ticket sales, corporate sponsorship for UFC and WWE, as well as increasingly getting municipalities around the world to pay site hosting fees. In the first quarter, UFC also struck what it said was its largest ever deal in terms of average annual value through a renewal with longtime sponsor Monster Energy. I'm sure you've seen them on the mats at UFC events. There was also a fresh deal that they struck with Meta, and TKO also had a hosting deal with the government of Perth, Australia, to bring some events there. We're going to see some WWE stuff for sure. DraftKings reported revenue of around $1.4 billion for the first quarter. That's up 20% from the same period last year, but slightly below what Wall Street was expecting. While there was narrower than expected losses for the first quarter, customer-friendly sport outcomes in March, people winning bets during March Madness, kept the company from raising its full-year sales outlook, but the share price was trending a little higher in pre-market trading. The company also said it's going to continue to monitor the situation with the predictions market. I'm talking companies like Kalshi out there. They're kind of skirting what their legal framework is for sports betting in this country and in states. Penn Entertainment had its best quarterly revenue since launching ESPN Bet at the end of 2023. That's a positive sign for the ESPN Bet app, ahead of the launch of this ESPN direct-to-consumer product in the fall. Yes, I'm trying incredibly hard not to call it flagship these days, but some growth there for ESPN Bet had been kind of stagnant, not getting the numbers that they wanted since that launch in Q4 of 2023. Flutter Entertainment, which owns FanDuel, it reported revenue of around $3.7 billion in the first quarter. That's up 8%. Flutter CEO Peter Jackson talked a lot about that predictions market I was just mentioning as well. You got their Kalshis out there, prize pick type companies that are not operating under that framework. Ask my colleague Bill King, it is the hottest topic in sports betting right now. Jackson also noted Flutter already owns the betting exchange platform Betfair, and seemed to indicate that Flutter could join companies like Kalshi and others versus fighting them legally and trying to get those shut down. Is Warner Brothers Discovery ready for its own SpinCo? I'm sorry. Versant is what we're calling it these days. I got to get used to that. SpinCo just rolled off the tongue a little bit. That seemed to be what David Zaslav was hinting at on Thursday, taking many of those cable networks and selling them or spinning them off, kind of what Comcast did with its cable networks. Maybe you keep HBO, like Comcast kept some like Bravo within its portfolio, but there are lots of sports on these WBD networks potentially in play. We're talking TBS, TNT, True TV, lot of sports throughout the year on those cable networks. Well, that's enough about Wall Street. How about East Capitol Street for you? That's where the site of RFK Stadium is, and it's likely going to be the home of the Commanders in the future. A new Washington Post Schar School poll found that 55% of D.C. residents favor using around $850 million in district funds to help finance a new $3.7 billion NFL stadium at the site. 39% oppose it. Good news, though, if you're Josh Harris & Co., I think a venue on this site makes all the sense in the world. I was talking to a longtime sports executive this week who had spent time working in the Beltway in sports, and he was reminding me of what the Caps and the Wizards, that arena, did for the Chinatown neighborhood in D.C., and what the Nationals and D.C. United venues have done in Southwest D.C. He was incredibly bullish on what the Commanders will be able to do on this plot of land in East D.C. In other NFL stadium news, Cleveland Mayor Justin Bibb has joined Cuyahoga County exec Chris Renane's earlier request to Ohio State senators to help pay for a potential renovation of the existing Huntington Bank field on the lakefront there in Cleveland. Bibb and Renane are asking state senators to reject the Browns' proposal to help fund a new stadium in the suburb of Brook Park and instead provide $350 million to renovate that existing stadium. This feels like politicians kind of tilting at windmills there in Northeast Ohio. When we had Jimmy Haslam on stage at the CAA World Congress of Sports last month, he was sounding like this Brook Park project is going to happen. He's going to see it through, even if there are some hurdles and headaches along the way. Down in Texas, Spurs chair Peter Holt pledged that San Antonio taxpayers are not going to be on the hook for paying for a new arena. He said that Spurs Sports and Entertainment is not looking to add a new tax to San Antonio citizens to help pay for the venue, which would be set alongside an entertainment district in Center City, anchored by Hemisphere and the Alamo Dome. 1 month after the start to the MLB season, the King of New York crown in the local ratings department belongs to the Mets. They lead the Yankees by 5% locally, even with both sitting in first in their respective divisions. The Mets do have the shinier new toy, though, in Juan Soto. Viewers have really tuned in to SNY to watch those, but no slouch there for Yes Network, but a competitive New York baseball market looks like it's happening this season. And speaking of crosstown battles, after some initial confusion, it turns out the new pope, who hails from Chicago, is a fan of the White Sox and not the Cubs. Makes total sense after he was nominated by a bunch of Cardinals. Yeah, using my dad joke quota there, so I'll move on from that. But let's wrap things up and get things going for this final day of the work week. A report out there notes Thrive Capital's Josh Kushner has bought a small stake in the Heat. The younger brother of Jared Kushner had a small stake in the Grizzlies that he did sell to make this happen. Mark Lazarus, the CEO of that Versant cable TV spinoff company, tells his colleagues down the hall at CNBC that his company is going to have its own sports strategy, maybe separate from NBC. Those are the cable networks that spun off within Comcast. He says NWSL and MLB have already spoken to his company, but one sport that Laz is not biting on, that's Formula One, which he says does not move the needle on cable distribution deals. I'm all about cheaper food at sports venues, so quick shout out to Matt Ishbia. The Mercury down in Phoenix revealed a $2 value menu for all of the team's home games this season, building on an initiative started in December for Suns home games at that arena in Phoenix. The Falcons were a trendsetter for this down in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. I've taken in a few events there at that building. Always a big win getting food at cheap prices like that. And finally, an early happy Mother's Day shout out to all the moms out there, including my own. Every time I do the Buzzcast, you hear me begin with Rise and Shine. Just know that's a tribute to my mom, who was a summer camp office administrator for so many years and would wake up the entire camp to that 3-word phrase, Rise and Shine. So that's your morning Buzzcast for Friday, May 9th. I hope everybody has a fantastic Friday, a great weekend. Make good choices out there, and I will speak to you all again soon.